Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for joining me. Today we're going to take a look at the M9935K from Sanyo from the 1980s. So she's getting on for 40 years old now. Quite a handsome unit, quite robust looking. It doesn't feel too bad to be honest either. And it's got a fair amount of features on it. Not massively over equipped, but let's take a quick look now, see what we've got. So there's a master volume control, and also a balance control, and a single tone looks after the EQ. In terms of function, it is literally just a tape recorder and a radio, so there's no phono input or anything like that on this. With regard to the tape deck though, we've got your usual stop, play, fast forward, rewind, and of course record and pause. But we've also got the automatic music select system, the AMSS, built into this as well. So we should in theory be able to do some forward and reverse track searching on this one. The radio on this one is a 4-band, but it's FM, medium wave, and there's no long wave on this, but there are indeed 2 shortwave bands. Now, there's a master tuning dial on the top and a small fine tuning knob on the side for your shortwave. With regard to the speakers, we've got 2 fairly decent sized woofers, and we've got some piezo speakers hidden away in there as well, hence the big 4-speaker logo just above the cassette door. Also got quite a handsome little vent underneath the cassette deck. Doesn't really do anything, but it looks pretty cool, and I guess in theory that's where VU meters might have ended up in another world. Speaking of meters though, we've got a VU stroke sound level LED bar on the top just there, and that shows your power output level. We've got an FM stereo light and 2 built-in microphones. That's pretty much it really, from the front at least. We do have a counter as well on a tape, just to mention that. And with regard to the side inputs, we have headphone out, we have microphone stereo left and right in. We also have external speaker outs as well, if you wanted to connect it up to a slightly bigger system. And I think that pretty much rounds it off. All I want to do today is take a quick look at it, crack it open, show you guys what's inside and give it a general service. So we'll have a look at the tape mech and change the belts, all that kind of thing. This particular one is not without its faults, namely the aerial is broken, so the end portion of the aerial just pulls out. Not terribly helpful, but I do have a spare I think that I can put on there. I'm also missing the fine tuning knob. Not overly worried about that because we don't really use shortwave much these days, not on a little boombox anyways, and I can fashion something up for it I'm sure, but I'm not going to worry too much about that today I don't think. This one's also missing a battery tab as well, or at least it's got a broken battery cover tab on the back. But I noticed, I had this a little while, and I noticed that I did have the sense, at least at the time, to tape the broken part onto the back of the battery cover. So we do have that, and I'll see if I can reattach that today. With regard to the tape deck, I think it plays okay, but we'll go in there anyway, give it a good clean. As I say, it looks a bit grubby in there, so we'll get some new belts on, and in any event, it's a perfectly good excuse to get in there and just see what this thing is inside. Finally, I think for now, is I noticed that the radio is working well, but in fact the FM stereo doesn't work. Now, there is a light in the top bar, which shows the FM stereo when it does work, and I've had a couple of fairly decent strong FM signals in here. Got a nice clear radio, and there isn't even the faintest touch of the FM stereo light coming on. Now, it might be a failed bulb, it may be that the pilot signal has drifted a little bit, so we'll take a quick look at that. It may even be to do with the aerial, to be honest, the fact the aerial's broken. So what I'll do is I'll change the aerial and see if that makes any difference, and if not, we'll see if we can get the FM stereo on. But anyway, there we go then. So it's a lovely looking unit, it's in decent condition, it's not broken or fractured too much, it's all original. And yeah, she's just needs a good clean and a bit of a service, I think. So with that being said, let's get it open and see what's inside. So I've got it on a Towel of Destiny, but the first thing I'm going to do is just replace the aerial. I'm fairly convinced that's not going to help with the FM stereo, but as we need to replace the aerial anyway, I've got one here that's fully retractable and the end does not come out of this one, unlike the existing one. So I'll just change the aerial. Try the FM one more time. If that doesn't fix it, we know we've got to do something on the inside. Well, there's the new aerial on at least, so that's going to be better. Needs a good polish of course, but first little job out of the way. Needless to say though, it hasn't improved the FM stereo signal, so we still need to look at that, but that's a job for the inside, so let's get this open then. Okay, well someone's used a wood screw in there, and there's supposed to be a little machine screw like that one, and there's two missing, so I'm guessing someone has been in here before, or at least partly. Okay, well there's a nice little rear access panel. I've had this on other Sanyo units before actually, and yeah, I think it's okay for testing purposes, for finding test points and checking out some of the circuitry. Doesn't actually help us as far as the mechanical parts are concerned, so I'm just going to go and put this cover plate back on and get it open. We'll get the knobs off. And there's a small screw just underneath the main tuning dial. Why it's always important to be careful. Right, it's probably attached by the speakers or something, so... Ah, okay, right, righty-ho. Interesting, Mr. Bond. Alright, well two of the cables here aren't attached at all. We'll find out what they are in a moment. But it is attached. Oh yeah, the speakers are all flipping heck. I'm going to bring this around and let you have a closer look, because this is a bit of a mess, to be honest. Well, this is fun. So I thought the sound was a little bit distorted and a bit in and out, but I figured that was because the radio wasn't sorted yet. And yeah, I figured because the tape deck needed servicing, we might be able to fix some of that. But it turns out that some of these wires, I don't even know where they're going quite at the moment, but whoever's had this out before has obviously just yanked the top off, taken the probably the speaker cables with them, hasn't had a soldering iron, and I'm not joking, I'm really not joking, these have literally been tied, hand tied around the terminals. Absolutely incredible. These contacts haven't even been soldered on. Listen, they're just loose. So there are three little speaker terminals there, which I'll get away in a second, and then we'll take a look at the two parts separately. So there are literally just three cables holding this faceplate on at the moment, and they are marked speaker right, orange, speaker left, that's your speakers away. So I've just taken the front casing away so we can take a quick look at it. Basically there's not much in here at all apart from the cassette door. We've got the two main speakers there and the piezo speakers. So yeah, I think it looks like these two piezos have come away from the main speakers there, and just in the process, I'm not even joking, let me just zoom in a bit, just in the process of removing this top plate, these loose hand tied ones, one of them's already come away. Absolutely incredible, brilliant. Yeah, and there's look at the state of this, man, dear oh me. Oh, flipping heck. Alright, well anyway, we'll cut that back later. So there's no crossover or anything like that. These piezos do literally just seem like they come from the terminals off of the corresponding speakers, which in turn take their feed left, right and a common ground onto the main board. So that's the faceplate. We'll sort that mess out in a minute. In fact, I'm going to sort it out now because yeah, it's kind of one of those things, I might as well just do it while I'm here, I think. Well, that's much better. That was a right old mess. Anyway, they're tinned up and soldered back on. I've put some fresh solder on the terminals. Also noticed as I was going to tuck them away nicely that one of the little pips has come away. There's supposed to be a little grey retaining pin just on the side, and then that kind of holds the cables out of the way. That's snapped off. So again, whoever was ham-fisted and removed this before has obviously broken that. So I'm just going to super glue that back in, and then I can put that all aside to dry whilst we take a look at the main event. So here's the main unit then, and we've got the AC cord as is, hardwired through the battery compartment here onto the board. You can see the transformer just there. So here's the sort of amp board section, which looks pretty scant, I've got to say. There's not a lot there, and I can see easily into the potentiometers there if we need to give them a clean. And then here's your various sort of mic inputs and speaker outputs and stuff like that along this edge just here. Cassette mech itself looks fairly clean. I've got to say this grease looks fairly hard. I think we're going to have to go through that a little bit. But the counter belt feels alright, to be honest. I can't feel yet the condition of the main belt. It doesn't seem too bad. It's present, if nothing else. So anyway, there's your motor. You've got an adjustment screw on the top as well to adjust the speed if you need to later. So that's quite handy to have. Also, what's quite nice is it's one of these sort of front-facing mechs. So with the top cover off, you can actually put the tape in, test it, do any calibrations with the speakers connected, and actually just tweak that as you go. Now anyway, the heads look pretty clean, they're in good condition, as is the capstan. Pinch roller looks okay, a bit dirty. There is a ferrite stripe on there that we'll need to sort of clean up, get that fresh again. And then the radio board over there, ferrite rod antenna of course, your waveband selector switch running through here. Wasn't too noisy, I don't think we need to clean that today. We do however have a variable resistor there, which is probably for the pilot signal, so we might take a look at that later if we need to adjust the FM stereo. But yeah, all in all, not too bad. Now, I do notice that there's a dented piece of aluminium there from the dial gauge, so I think somebody, I keep saying this, but I think someone's been in here before, to be honest. But anyway, that's a quick look at the main unit, the internals. Quite, as I say, quite empty in here. There's not a lot going on. Should be easy enough to work on. And in terms of getting the mech out then, I think we'll probably get the dial gauge away and go from there. The main screws we can see easily enough that mount into the posts, so that's good. The posts themselves are in good condition, I've got to say. There's no broken ones there, so that's quite nice. Looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, probably 5 screws to get the mech out. But as I say, we've probably got to get the dial gauge away anyway, just to see what's going on. Okay, so I've just hooked up the speakers loosely back up to the board. It's a good test for the speakers that we've just soldered back up, but also I want to try and get this FM stereo working if I can. Now I've just got this linked up now to 9 volts DC. I'm not going to run it live, I'm not going to mess about down here with the AC voltage and everything being open, so I'm literally just hooking this up to the battery contacts. So there we go then, that's the FM stereo working again, so it's time to take a look at the cassette deck. So for the cassette deck, I'm just going to see if I need to get this tuner dial gauge away. Okay, we can better see the mech now. There are, I think, 2, 4, 5 screws to get out to turn it over. It's actually soldered onto the board over on this side, so I think it'll be a case of just literally taking it out, maybe putting it on a little cushion or something on the other side to change the belts. But while I am here, I think I'm just going to clean up this side first. So I'm just going to clean the heads, the capstan, get this ferrite off the pinch roller, start to loosen up and remove some of this old grease, and we'll go from there. Okay, well I've cleaned the heads, the capstan, the pinch roller, given everything a general dust and a bit of a degrease. Not perfect yet, but I can always fettle that a bit later. So let's take a look at the other side then. So we've got a little cable clamp holding the head in there. We'll get these mech screws out, see what we've got. Oh my days. Oh my days. Ugh. Oh. Right, okay, I'll show you all of that in a moment. I like that little hinge though for the record bar. That's pretty snazzy. But yeah, this is not pretty. Ugh. Ugh. Just drag everything over to show you. There's definitely a belt that's got completely worked into all of the gears on here. So it's just absolutely disgraceful. It's sticky black, everything's horrible in here. So I'm just going to get this cover off and we'll take a bit of a closer look at it. Yeah, it gets worse. Oh dear, oh dear. Oh dear. Yeah, see, this is really gooey now. I don't know if I'm missing anything on here at all. But there's your motor, turning the flywheel, which in turn has the second belt which comes across. Yeah, that's a little bit slippy, not too bad. But what concerns me is everything here is just coated in. Every gear is just coated in that. Which may not focus, but suffice to say, it's very black, it's very sticky, and oh my word, this is going to need some proper cleaning. Okay. So without trying to get that goo all over my hands, what I'm just going to do is take away belt number 1, which, as I say, doesn't look too bad, I've got to be honest. Belt number 2. Yeah, same again. Not the worst in the world. I'm going to turn this over though and catch the oil washer, because I'm about to just, there we go, the little washer on the other side of the capstan. I'll put that safe, and I can withdraw the flywheel. Okay, so either a tyre has completely given out, which is unlikely, but I just think that might be an old belt or something. Either way, it's disgusting and needs a decent clean. So that's going to take me about 3 years to clean all this up. Honestly. See, tyres don't normally go like that. That's normally belts. And I think an old belt potentially has just let go at some point and someone's replaced them and decided that it's far too much trouble, potentially, to do anything about it. But I'll clean these up, I'll see what we've got, see what we're up against, and we'll just have to take it from there, I guess. I've just thrown the flywheel back in really quick because I wanted to just double check the measurements of the belts, because I'm going to order up a whole new kit for these. Also then we need to just take the little counter belt off as well. Nice and easy. So we have ourselves the main belt there, the transfer belt, and the counter belt. So I'll go and measure these up, try some more for best fit, get a kit together, get those on order, and yeah, no rush on those, because like I say, it's going to take a long time to clean up all the rest of this residue first anyway. Well, I've cleaned the flywheel up. Now the main thing is that the running surfaces are okay, but I've cleaned all the stuff that was all on the inside, scrubbed that right out as best as I can. Believe it or not, any residual marks now is literally staining of the aluminium, so the actual detritus and rotten molten dissolved rubber is off of there, and that's going to help obviously with the balance of rotation on this. So as long as it's clean enough for that, that's the main thing. But as for these, well, they are just gross. I mean, I don't even want to touch them. They are, well, as soon as I go anywhere near them, I just get black on my hands. I really don't know what to do for the best. I can't really clean them with any sense in situ. I'm going to try, I think, but I might just end up having to get the circlips off, maybe numbering them up, pop in loads of circlips and split washers, and maybe disassembling the whole thing and giving them a clean independently. You know, sometimes you start a job and you wish you hadn't bothered. This is one of them. Well, here's the first one off. You can see the problem. Obviously, this is a clutch one. You can see the friction material just there. So somehow I've got to just gently just clean away all of that black without damaging or contaminating the surface. Good watch I don't lose any of the tiny little E-clips or any of that either. So yeah, this is just going to be one of those very methodical little jobs. I mean, literally just holding that up for you for the camera look, you can see how it's just totally falling apart. So yeah, right, okay, wish me luck, and I'll see you at some point in the future. Well, here we are, sometime later. I've now got pots of cleaned up components. There's one there, another one there, and another one here. So I've tried to keep the clutch materials as clean and dry as I can. I've tried to get in the nooks and crannies. Obviously I can't do alcohol washes and stuff like that because I'm going to contaminate all the other stuff. So I've really just had to get in there with my fingernails and cloths. In fact, I'll just show you some of the stuff that's come out. This is literally just from today. I mean, there are rags and rags and rags and rags of just goo. I've never actually seen anything like it, to be honest. However, so as I say, it's not perfect, but I've also cleaned up relevant sort of bearing surfaces and stuff like that. I have lost one very tiny E-clip. I don't know if you can even see in there. There's an E-clip just in there. I've lost one of them, so I've got to try and find another one somewhere else in my spares pot, because I didn't even hear it go. It just gone. So what I'm going to try and do now is get all this back together. Like I say, it's not perfect, far from perfect in fact, but an awful lot better than it was, and at least we got a chance. In fact, it'll be a miracle if the thing even works at all after this, by the time I've put these 100 pieces back in. But you never know, we can live in hope. So I'm now about to just put everything back together, and hopefully it will resemble what it did before, except marginally cleaner. Okay guys, it is literally several hours later now. There could be a huge monologue coming up. I'm going to keep it as short as possible, so do please bear with me. I have literally had the flywheel in and the belts in and out and in and out about 20 to 30 times, and that is no exaggeration. We have a bit of a saying here in the UK sometimes with an old car that the rust is the only thing holding it together. With this cassette mech, I think it genuinely was the degenerated belt that was the only thing making it work, because as soon as I stripped it all down and cleaned it up, it actually stopped working. Would you believe? It was working better whilst everything was gummed up and still in contact with each other. As soon as I stripped it and cleaned it all out, actually the tolerances became such then that it stopped working. So I had an issue with the idler tyre on this reel just here, or that pulley, and I tried everything to try and clean that up. I tried various sizes of O-rings, either larger ones as they were or smaller ones that were stretched out to make them the same outside diameter but enough to tuck into the pulley. Oh, just all sorts of stuff. Didn't really work. Then I tried just adding 0.5 millimeter or so to the outside diameter of the idler by putting an elastic band, these like kiddie bands around there. That wouldn't stay on. In the end, so I just couldn't find an idler tyre the right size anywhere for this. So what I've done is actually fitted a flat belt instead to the outside of this spindle here. Has the same net effect of having the extra rubber on that tyre, but instead now it takes up against this particular spindle here. So we kind of got around that problem. Belts on and off and on and off and on and off, and then certain things worked. Fast forward wouldn't work, rewind would, and that sort of thing. And again, just trying all these different take-ups and bearing in mind that they are geared, so once they're in the right position, there's no reason at all why they shouldn't work. It was just trying to get the transfer off of the capstan and across to the different reels. And as I say, it's literally 20 to 30 times of trying all of this and fettling it and putting different tyres on and different bands and getting it to work. It occurred to me in the end that one of the issues was the position of this reel here, this pulley, needed to act on the capstan. And if you remember back in the early part of this, it was absolutely horrendous. It was all gummed up and filthy, and we couldn't figure out what had happened. But I just think that might be an old belt or something. It turns out, just through trial and error really with this, is there must have been some sort of tyre or belt around there which had degenerated, and that's what had got picked up into all of the gears and therefore transferred throughout the whole system and gummed it all up. So what I've done is I've actually put a couple of flat belts, one over the top of the other there, to form a tyre, as it were. So that now, once that's in place, will now transfer onto the other reels when it needs to, and that will then get picked up and through the various sort of spindles and what have you. So yeah, it's been an absolute labour of love. I mean, these are, incidentally, I was saying about the belts, I've just put the old belts on and off and on and off because they were still technically working. Just you'd get a tiny bit of wow and flutter in theory, because obviously they're not quite, slightly out of round. The new ones are still on order and on their way. So yeah, it's just been a nightmare. And I know this is a monologue, but you wouldn't believe the time and effort in just fettling and turning and trying, because of course you've got to put all this back together, put the little split washers back in, put the cover plate, the bearing keeper plate back in, screw all that up. Oh, and another thing as well is that I'd actually lost a motor screw. So one of the things I noticed, it was vibrating. Once I'd got it up and running, it was still vibrating a lot, and it turned out that the motor was actually loose as well. So there's two screws here just at the top of frame. There's one is the original one, but I noticed that there was a screw missing from the motor mount, so that motor was loose, which wasn't helping things at all. And I looked back through the footage and noticed that that was never there. So that was why the mechanism was a bit noisy at the very outset. So anyway, got the motor securely mounted now. We've got the idler tyre cleaned up and seems to be working. We've got another belt as a kind of idler rubber on this spindle here. We've got a couple of belts acting as a tyre on there. Yeah, so I'm just going to do now is put a drop of oil on the capstan. We'll feed that through, lock it all down as it were once these new belts come, and hopefully that will be it. So there you go, bit of a monologue, but I'll tell you what, this is the thing, is some of these old mechs, and this is the thing with the old cassette mechanisms and general boomboxes and Walkmans and stuff like that. It's often the fettling that's the hard work with these. It's just trying to get it to run. You know, you can't buy a lot of these parts off the shelf. You just have to have a collection of random odds and sods around the place and do what you can, trying to understand what's happening, what's going on, how the different mechanisms working, how the take up and transfers work, and just trying to get everything to fettle so that it works as intended. So I'm hoping that we've got there. Okay, well, thank you for listening to that 5 minutes of me rambling on. Let's actually see some action, get the belts back on once they arrive tomorrow, and we'll get it back together and go from there. So I'm going to sign off from today. That's all we can really do. Right, I'm just going to fix this battery cover if I can. It was obviously snapped on arrival, so at least I'd had the foresight, I guess, to tape it back on to the back of there. So here we go then. It's a clean break, which is great. So I'm just going to super glue this in, I think, first. And it's going to take a lot of stress. I don't really trust the glue that much, but if I can glue it together, I can probably then reinforce it with a bit of a melted plastic weld or something like that. So at least for now, let's just get it together. Okay, it's the next day now actually, and the belts have arrived, so all three are here. We'll assemble everything now, but first I just want to put a drop of oil on the motor spindle, and I'll put a tiny drop as well just on the capstan, just to help that in its bearing. So we'll get that on first. Always remember to refit the oil washer, of course. And I'll just clean that with some isopropyl alcohol now so that there's no grease anywhere on the actual capstan itself. And we'll get these belts on. And just checking that there's no oil on the bearing surface for the belts. Rightio then, so we've got these 3 belts to go on. Hopefully they'll do the job. Like I say, the ones that came off weren't the worst in the world really. It's funny, sometimes the easiest belts in the world to go on are actually the trickiest as well. Come on. That tie is right in the way with those cables there. And that pulley deflects it as well. And that post. Right, got there in the end. Good. That one feels nice. Yep, good. Solid grip on that. Happy days. Right, next one. There we go. Lovely. Yep. Yeah, happy with that. And the tiniest little bit of grease on the bearer just there. To be honest, it's a nylon pad and it should be self-lubricating really, but there was a tiny bit of grease there from the factory originally, so we'll put that back on. Okay, may as well put the counterbelt on as well while we're at it, haven't we? Nice. Okay, ladies and gents. Time to get some power onto the board and we'll give it a go, see if it works. Right, first things first, does it fast forward? Yes. Rewind. Yep, obviously auto stop because there's no tape in there. Play seems to be working as well. Whether that's strong enough with the tape in there. In fact, okay, let's try. Yeah, let's just try a random tape here. So. So it's rewinding okay. Fast forwarding okay. Seems to be playing alright. No, it's a bit slack on the... It's a bit hesitant on the take up, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know if I trust that. I'm just going to play around for another couple of tapes just to see whether or not I trust that. I might need to put an extra belt on the take-up reel. We'll have a look. So I've just taken it apart again. What I've had to do is put an extra band around the bottom of the flywheel, and that's given us just that extra bit of bite and bit of take-up that we needed. You can see it's playing perfectly happily now, and it's fast forwarding. You might not see that on the counter with the camera angle, but it's fast forwarding and rewinding okay. And then if I press play, yeah, it seems to be working fine now. I say seems to be because I'm having to do this again. It's kind of, the belts have been out, obviously I've had to get back under the capstan. So yeah, it should be okay. As far as I can tell, it's working, and I noticed that the auto stop was working as well. So for like the 100th time probably, I'm going to get the plate back onto the back of the flywheel here, try it properly, then we'll, if the mech's working okay, we'll hook the speakers up and give it a final test with a couple more cassettes. Hopefully that'll be enough and we can get on with it. Okay, I've just put everything together back on the rear, got the oil washer back on, clean the capstan and indeed the pinch roller again, make sure there's no oil on there. So let's try this again, and I think play is this one. Okay, well that seems to be doing the job, and Fast forward is strong. I think we've cracked it. So I'm going to hook the speakers up, give it a run with a couple of different tapes, leave it for a little while, and I think we've sorted that finally. It's been a bit of an epic task this one way or another, but I think we've got there. We're not too far away from putting it back together now. Okay, well, I've got a couple of cassettes here. I've hooked the speakers up, so not the best tapes in the world these, but it'll give us an idea, and then I can also tweak the tape using that little screw there, tweak the speed if we need to. So here we go then, let's give this a go. So the easy stuff first. There's the fast forward, rewind and play. Good stuff. Alright, I know Fleetwood Mac get particularly tetchy about the content match. We'll give a bit of Genesis a go. And again, fast forward, rewind. Might seem a bit repetitive this, but sometimes older tapes, especially ones that have been chewed up and snarled about or dried out, sometimes they'll fast forward and not rewind, or vice versa if they've got a bit tight or a bit dry. So I'm just giving the whole mechanism a few goes really with different tapes. So here we go then, press play. Okie dokie, nice. And again. Happy days. And maybe one for luck. As I say, after I've just finished this little clip, I'll go ahead and test them for a little while longer, make sure they're running properly over a long period of time. But yeah, happy with that. The main thing I'm looking for at this stage is the take up through here. Obviously the motor's okay and the capstan's pulling it through against the pinch roller. The problem really is at this end where the take up wasn't working properly and it was chewing the tapes or spitting them out because we had a lazy take up reel. We've eliminated that problem now. So as I say, I'm just going to run these now for a little while, make sure I'm happy with it, and I'll start putting it back together again. Right, well I'm happy with that, so I'm going to now put the original cassette mech retaining screws back in, and we're getting there. I did notice during disassembly that the dial needle for the radio had also fallen off as well. The glue has perished. It's like a funny soft glue, and that's come away. So what I'll do is I'll just get the dial gauge back on now, tune it into a station that we know, and then line the needle from there, and then we should be able to put the top case back on, give it a clean. There we go then, so I've just installed that. I'll set up a second radio just to the side, tune that in, got the frequency, and then align the needle, glued that back in place, so that should be okay now. Yep, that's sliding fine. Good stuff. Also, I noticed whilst I was just testing that against the radio that it wasn't quite turning down to 0. So I've just cleaned and lubricated the volume pot as well, which is just underneath here. That was easy enough to get to. So now it goes to absolute silence when you set the volume to 0. So I think I'm just pausing here to do a sanity check. Everything's done, everything's clean, screwed back in, zip tied up, needle sorted. Just going to clean the inside of the tuner dial window, give the case a bit of a clean, get that back on, give it a polish. So here it is then, the M9935K from Sanyo, all sorted, looks great, sounds great, but my word, it was a bit of a labour of love to be honest. I really didn't think it was going to put up so much of a fight as it did, but there you go. I've got a bit of a list here, in fact, of all the niggles that it had. It started just as soon as we opened up the case to find out that someone had been in here before and literally ripped the faceplate away and taken the speaker cables with them. I'm trying not to laugh because they obviously didn't have a soldering iron either, so they'd tied some cables back on loosely with loops, others they'd knotted with a bit of copper wire, and then the other cables they'd just completely given up and didn't even bother doing anything with them. I thought it sounded a bit sketchy and a bit distorted when I first actually tried it, but only when I got inside found that these cables all needed stripping back and resoldering. So that was the first little job before we'd even started. There was no FM stereo, and whilst the radio itself worked, the pilot signal had drifted slightly, so we just had to retune that to bring the stereo back to the radio. So all was good with that.
Breezy but staying mild tomorrow.
The Wiltshire Rewind.
With
Also with the radio, the aerial was broken, the end section of the aerial just came away, so I've replaced the aerial with a vintage 3-piece one, so it's got some decent reach to it, and the FM stereo does work nicely now, which is fantastic. Now there are other ancillaries as well, like there was a missing fine tuner knob. I've found one. It's not the exact one for the model, but it works, which is fantastic. Also the battery cover tab, or at least one of them, was broken, had snapped away, so at least we had the spare part. So I've actually replaced that, or I should say fixed it with some sort of melting of glue and that kind of thing, and we've got it working, so that's fine. It does the job. Now it's also had a deep clean and a polish on the outside, which is, you know, that's a cosmetic thing, and I guess I'm skirting around the issue here now, but the main issue with this was of course the cassette mech. Now I thought this would be a simple belt change, to be honest with you, and got inside and found that it was just this unholy mess, absolute black tar and goo, the likes of which I'd never actually seen before. I mean, it spread over all of the gears and was just awful. So we've had to take all of the spindles, all of the gears out. We've taken the clutches out, given everything sort of best as clean as we could, only to find out that there was wear and tear on the mech then. So we had to kind of build that in by adding belts, adding flywheel belts, pulley belts, all that kind of thing. So in addition to the 3 main drive belts, or at least the auto stop, the main drive belt and the counter, you've also had to have extra belts around the perimeter of some of the spindles, and also rebuild one around the base of the flywheel as well. Long and the short of this monologue is we finally got there with it. The FM stereo works, new aerial, the cassette mech has been totally gone through, head, capstan, everything been cleaned, pinch rollers been cleaned. It's had a deep clean and polish all round. The speakers have all been soldered back together, and it finally works. So yeah, I'll give you a quick section of music here now. Oh, incidentally, one of the things was it didn't eject properly before either. It was sort of catching and snagging a bit. I can only imagine that's where the person that had been in this before, the same one that had ripped the speakers out, had actually not put it back together properly, and that's why it wasn't ejecting, but it does properly now. So let's try it out. And I'll start with the fast forward. Working nicely, the counter's working as well, and rewind, and the counter's now going back. Happy days. Right, the bit we had the real trouble with, will it play? I'll take that as a yes. You can see it ejects nicely. Play the other side. Okay, I can only play you a few seconds because of content match and stuff. And also bear in mind the mic isn't actually facing the unit, it's facing me as I'm speaking to you now, but it's got a really rich sound actually. And those piezo speakers, now they're soldered in, don't sound too bad, to be fair. Better than nothing. I know they're the sort of thing you find in games consoles of the time and things like that. So yes, they're not as good as woofers obviously, or little magnetic tweeter drivers, but they still do the job. So it sounds great now overall, it looks fab, it all works, and yeah, we can breathe a sigh of relief now. So thanks ever so much for watching. Please do consider subscribing if not already, and look after yourselves. I'll be back soon. Take care for now. Bye bye.